Okay. Professor Jackson Hearth is working at Temple University. His work focuses on Kant with particular interest in aesthetics and cognition. Jackson, would you like to say a few more things about your work?
Sure. So my specific interest with Kant is on the faculty of the imagination, and currently my the some of the pieces that I'm working on look at the intersection of Kant's transcendental faculties and some of the issues of artistic cognition and our understanding of mental health.
Great. Would also like to hear a few more things about Daniel. Daniel, who is working at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia and also in Rowan University in New Jersey. And he is also into Kant, and he has also written a book about logical worldview. Daniel, would you like to tell us a few more things about your work? Daniel is having some technical problems, but it's okay. Before we start our discussion, I'd like to make a short presentation about the ideas and views of Chomsky, Rousseau, and Mill on direct democracy and democratic issues. Noam Chomsky states, first and foremost, that democracy is a value in itself. In other words, he says that you don't have to defend democracy or freedom, as they're both part of human nature. So it's natural for human beings to feel free to participate so as not to being either oppressed or suppressed. If this is not the case, then the public is subject to the control of private wealth. And people will start reflecting that human greed is a powerful weapon. And of course, this is not a good idea. And so if a global society, according to Noam Chomsky, has these kind of principles, is heading towards the path of destruction. Nowadays, according to Chomsky, democracy is linked with the process of ratification of proposed laws by the government. When, for example, people choose in between two parties, left-wing party and right-wing party, according to their own preferences. But Chomsky wonders, how meaningful is this? I'm going to also admit another participant. Noam Chomsky thinks that the actual meaning of democracy, a meaningful democracy, is an active participation in the creation of decisions on behalf of the participants, of the public. So we've got to find a method with which to get the people into the participating process itself, the decision-making process itself. And this has implications of direct democratic procedures, because the state, the governors, the government cannot silence the public. So the whole democratic process, in a sense, is seen as an obstacle to be overcome on behalf of the governors. Noam Chomsky thinks, but what happens if people throw themselves in the public arena? And the answer to that is crisis. So in a sense, the governments have to make sure that decision-making power lies in the hands of a specialized class, or smart guys, as he calls them, by keeping the general population out, by marginalizing voters, in a sense, and manufacturing consent, fixing things, in other words. So the people in power make them as indifferent, obedient, and let them participate not as active participants, but as mere consumers and chatterers, leaving them in the shadow, in other words. So there's an attempt on behalf of those in power to offer governmental legitimacy, legitimating ratification and decision taken by others. So they allow people to, they do allow people, nevertheless, to react in the public arena. Reactions are okay, They say that you can react as much as you desire, no matter how you do it, no matter what the consequences are sometimes, insofar as you do not get together in any possible way with an aim to influence our own predetermined decisions. So this specialized class tries to eliminate all methods by which voters can educate and organize themselves, take legal actions that could really have an effect on the voting process. Noam Chomsky advises us to take lessons from the doctrines of the Enlightenment. In such a way, individuals shall not be subject to any kind of oppression. Kinds of oppressions that are established by many institutions like the church, the military regime, the state, or the feudal system. And he also states something very clearly, that lately corporations are a new form of power with an immense power over the state decisions and also economy. They have absolutely, they can absolutely control what is produced, distributed, or invested. But of course, the problem is that the gains are narrowly concentrated on behalf of these corporations. So how do voters have to think, he asks. He believes that the public mind does count, the public opinion does count, so long as it is well argumented, so long as people have this kind of critical thought, reflection, and a critical eye, and the whole thought process works in an interdisciplinary way. So the interests at stake are not a problem of the few that are in the government, but are a problem of the entire community. Now, moving on to Rousseau, in a nutshell, Rousseau's views say that, okay, human beings are by nature good, but they can be badly influenced by society. He focuses more on how to live our lives autonomously and become more free. He says that we cannot do away with the arts and the sciences, even though he's against the progress of sciences and arts, because he thinks that they both downgrade moral principles, human moral principles, but instead of getting rid of them, we can go hand in hand with them. We can travel with them on the journey, sometimes a journey with no return. And even though he criticizes corruption of modern society, he offers an alternative, such as the notion of a harmonious life, agrarianism, like living in a village, living in some sort of organized agricultural life. Moving on with Rousseau, he thinks that he asks the question, how can we do away with this sort of bad things going on within the political society? He has an answer to that as well. He thinks that we shall not be based on the impressions and ideas and representations of ideas that modern political society provides us with, but he thinks that we shall not take into account the fact that the capitalist society has been sent to us by God as non-negotiable. We have to challenge this idea that bourgeois society has been sent to us by God. And this dogmatic statement, because once we do this, we will be free from our terrible passions of civilization. there won't be any economically powerful people controlling the powerless. So in that sense, we will try to get rid of any bad consequences and eliminate the miseries of our world, such as murders, crimes, wars, all of them which contradict the nature of the natural state of people. And what does Rousseau ultimately propose? He proposes the social contract, of course, as a free community of people, a contract between parties with the same rights and same obligations without any hegemonies or charismatic exceptions. And last but not least, the philosopher John Stuart Mill is an advocate of citizens' rights to participate in politics so as to defend their interests in the public debates. He believes in the philosophy of utilitarianism, which states that the government should act in such a way to produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number of sentient beings. So, in a sense, maximizing happiness to the society as a whole. His views on liberty are that people are actually caught between a rock and a hard place, meaning that they're influenced by both the tyranny of the rulers and also that of the majority, because there is a conformism in thought, character, and action, which is sometimes even worse than the tyranny of the rulers. And he proposes the harm principle, the idea basically that promotes individuals' growth and also society's utility. According to his views, the conditions under which individuals can flourish and be happy are the freedom of action, freedom of thought, discussion, freedom of press, freedom of character, and that people should be critical thinkers, open to difference and reasoning through the overarching principle of morality. So Mill actually proposes the model of representative democracy because he thinks that direct democracy is a bit impractical due to the uneducated masses. So he thinks that representative democracy would better serve people's interests, but not in the today's sense of voters delegates. He sees delegates as having this sort of duty that could make up their own mind about what is the common good, and by developing a great feeling of responsibility, being as educated as possible and making as wise decisions as possible in the parliament. So in that sense, they have a high sense of social duty imbued into the personality. So these are the main things I'd like to say about the ideas of Chomsky, Rousseau, and Mill on direct democracy. And I'm waiting for your comments. I tried to be as brief as possible.
Yeah, so Demetrius, can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, I lost connection for a moment there, but I heard most of your talk. But thank you for the talk, Demetrius. It was very stimulating and thought-provoking. One comment I have is about free speech. I think Mill was an advocate of free speech, freedom of speech. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about John Stuart Mill?
Yes, Mill's advocacy of freedom of speech. And the idea is that we should have freedom of speech so as to, if we have something that's erroneous, we could benefit from that by developing our own views. So if there's an error, someone's wrong, that is a benefit because we can develop our own views in a more correct and profound way. So let's say, we have people who are, in the United States, we used to have a somewhat powerful group called the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan, which was a racist group. Let's say they marched down the street. So they'd be allowed to march and share their, toxic views. Well, Mill would say, yes, we should allow open expression because even though they might be wrong, other people can observe this and develop their own views in this way. So they can see the error, and through seeing the error, they can become clearer about what is true. So there's just no downside to having free speech.
Even if sometimes it sounds too strange an opinion.
Exactly. It could be a bizarre opinion, a conspiracy theory, or something that very few people believe or find offensive. And Mill says we should permit it because if it could be right. Sometimes the masses are wrong. Sometimes what most people believe is false. But it could also be totally wrong. Something that is offensive, something that maybe is racist or something that's taboo, but we should let it out because if you suppress it, the people will find a way to maybe express it in some other way. There could be maybe, it could lead to violence. People don't have an outlet to share what they feel, what they think. It could lead to violence.
This is a way to prevent violence. This could also be used. This could also be used as a preventive measure. So it's better to state one's own opinions in public to test them. Let's say. So anyone who would like to express his or her own viewpoints could use the hand, could raise his or her virtual hand, or just take the floor to speak.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself and?
Sure. So I'm AISHA, and actually I am pursuing my PhD from Delhi University. It's my final year, and the topic of my PhD is epistemological intuition from a Western philosophical point of view.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Would you like to
I would just like to make a comment, a remark on what Professor Daniel was saying about free speech. That's free speech. Mill is an advocate of free speech, and Ku Klux Klan. He gave the example of Ku Klux Klan that freedom of speech, if it is misused, it can lead to formations like Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, that's right. But Mill would say that you should allow that to happen because having that error out in the public can provide a way to develop your own views. If that makes any sense.
I didn't get. Could you please repeat yourself?
yeah, the idea is that by having that error out in public, having people talk about it, you can get a clearer sense of what is true. So by understanding the error, you understand the truth better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Professor Daniel said that it's okay to air false beliefs. It's a productive, it's a kind of productive thinking process. Goes if you're engaged in an open exchange of ideas, other people may doubt your opinions, and so you sooner or later you're going to abandon them if you're forced by peers, if your beliefs are false. And of course, there's another thing that if others force you to reaffirm your own beliefs and ideas, your ideas are not going to be a dogma anymore. So they're pretty much replaced by more balanced views, let's say, according to what others have to say, what others think. Thank you for your contribution. Does anybody else want to jump in about any issues that we've mentioned so far?
Sure. I can kind of talk a little bit more about this idea of free speech, because I do think it's, when we're talking about democracy, naturally free speech and like sort of either free speech or restricted speech is going to be a major component in this kind of setup that we're going for. So one thing that we kind of, at least here in the United States, that we talk about is exactly what's required for speech to be considered free. So there's one, and this is the idea I generally see, is the idea that says, well, the speech is free as long as it's not the government that's getting in the way or limiting the speech, right? If individuals want to limit speech, or if corporations, to kind of bring in some of the stuff from Chomsky, if corporations want to limit speech, perfectly fine. It's not the government doing it, so your speech is not being infringed if it's a corporation or a powerful entity that's non-governmental. But I wonder if that speech can be called free. It's like, sure, the government's not saying you can't talk, but let's say if people get deplatformed, right? They get kicked off of social media, they lose their job because of speech. It's not the government that's doing it, it's a corporation or another private entity. I'm wondering if Mill or Chomsky or whomever would still consider that to be, well, it's free, but and then the idea would be like it's free speech, but it's not freedom of consequence, is kind of what a lot of people say. So I kind of wanted to introduce that idea and and see what the other members here of the panel think about that.
Yeah, very insightful remark, I dare say. How much of a free speech is this considered to be? Maybe it's not banned from the government itself directly, but what if corporations and social media put this infringement on individuals? Is this considered to be a free speech? So does anybody want to jump in and have a say?
Hello. I am from India, and as I see in title, it's about direct democracy, according to Locke and Rousseau, right?
Mill and Rousseau.
John Stuart Mill and
John Mill and Rousseau. Yeah. As I thinking, direct democracy never possible. because masses are never logical. It's not possible our masses ever be logical, because masses cannot thinking according to reasoning. It's the statement that I gave. I can choose a lot of evidence from history. Masses are never logical. So direct democracy never possible. As we thinking today, people have a lot have freedom of speaking anything on social media. If we visit a lot of apps, we can analysis the opinion of people very easily. Then if we visit a lot of apps, social media app, there we can find what kind of people are there. What kind of people there are. As I conclude, in the time of today, people are not so logical. People are not so reasonable in every country. So direct democracy not possible. It's my opinion. I'm saying direct democracy never possible in future also.
Yes, that's the thing. That's why John Stuart Mill thinks likewise. He's pretty much against direct democracy, basically due to the fact that the masses are uneducated and they can't cope with this bulk of political issues that have to be dealt with. And he also brings the notion of justice, which is essential for utility, that is, for the benefit of the community. But he puts another issue, that of social duty, which is far more important than justice. So he proposes that the delegates themselves have to have this sort of social duty, this sort of responsibility when they speak on behalf of the masses. They should not only do they have to be responsible for their own actions, but they should also be held accountable for their own mistakes once they do them. So this sense of social duty on the part of delegates is very, very important, according to Mill. That's why he proposes the system of representative democracy instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I ask a question here?
Yes, of course, Daniel.
Yes, so let me ask a question here. So I understand that you know, the masses may not be able to be reasonable, and that's a very good point, and I think that's fair enough. But then how do you prevent the leadership from pursuing its own interests? So I think we have a problem, and maybe it's a global problem, of a leadership class, a political class that is not pursuing the interest of the ordinary person. And it's creating a lot of tension where we have a leadership class that is pursuing wars, is pursuing increasing its own wealth and power. And Jackson alluded to this as well with the corporations, the big tech. So if we can't, as ordinary people, exercise some political power, how do we ensure that our representatives, the leadership class, the elites, how do you ensure that they actually act on behalf of the common good rather than pursue their own self-interest?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Who would like to start first? I can wait.
I'd like to just kind of ask maybe just a theoretical question for Dan and get his ideas on it, just so we're kind of clear some of where his concerns are. Let's say, hypothetically, Dan, that there was a leadership class, and this leadership class does make its decisions in the benefit of the masses. Would you be ethically opposed to this type of setup where, again, hypothetically speaking, that there is that a leadership class does look out for the people under its jurisdiction? And would this be an ethical kind of setup for you, or would you say no? Any type of sort of like distant leadership class, whatever their motives, whatever their actions might be, is still it still doesn't represent, freedom and democracy and the rule of the people.
Okay, so this is a very good question. So Jackson, you're asking, would I theoretically accept a leadership class that is virtuous? It's not a direct democracy. They're kind of like exercising some oversight over the so-called masses. Would I accept that? And my first reaction, I think I would. I think that would be like an aristocracy in a good sense, not an oligarchy, but an aristocracy. You have people who are in leadership who have a kind of noblesse oblige would be the word for it. I think it's a French term, noblesse oblige, where you feel like since you have achieved a certain level of privilege in your life, you have a duty to give back. So at my first glance, I think I would accept that, a kind of aristocracy of people who are highly educated, highly virtuous, kind of maybe like a Platonic philosopher king kind of thing. I think I would be fine with that. I wouldn't see any kind of intrinsic good in a direct democracy.
Yeah, thanks for your honesty and your clarity. Yes, I kind of did have in mind. I was sort of, trying to see like what your last point there, is democracy intrinsically good, which is kind of what Chomsky, that's his central claim. But yeah, I kind of had in mind to suggest a sort of a Platonic philosopher king's, aristocracy of the able, if you would. The ones that are just best suited for this type of thing. But of course, that is a theoretical question, and exactly how to achieve that and how to guarantee it, well, that's a completely different set of questions. But yeah, thanks for your clarity on that. I think that's very well stated. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So does anybody else want to jump in and comment on Professor's health position? Question? Maybe any comments? Hello, how are you?
Hello. Yeah. Am I breaking up, or is my voice clear?
Yeah.
It's clear. We can hear you now. Yeah.
It's clear. Okay. So I just want to say that it was just asked that if democracy is internally flawed, right? So I think the problem nowadays that we are facing in democracies is that, first of all, there's this I would say leadership vacuum, because all we have are a few selected leaders whom we are re-electing. And I think we are also kind of prejudiced, and that's why we don't want to, we are not permitting others to, come forward in leadership. I think so. This is a problem, leadership vacuum, and we have prejudices as a society. So I think we need to, So democracy, I think it's not internally flawed, but the thing is, we as a society, unless we become I think, socially and educationally forward. And for that, I think information and education plays a very, important, vital role. So I think, first of all, we need to, establish that sort of equality. And then I think we can prevent, crony capitalism or other sorts of, leaderships that are, taking place right now in different democracies. So, yeah. And another thing, hello?
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Yeah. Another thing I would like to say is that for direct democracy, I think Kant's categorical imperative is a great, place to begin. If we are to, make our policies directly, I think we as people should follow Kant's categorical imperative when we have to form laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is the kind of insight I just had right now. So I thought of sharing. Okay, but I would like to, hear what others have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Aisha.
Aisha. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, these are also issues that keep coming up on the surface, especially the issue of categorical imperative and Kant's universalistic principle, and how this could be implemented, at least theoretically. Of course, there are more and more ethical issues that should be considered. For instance, regarding to your question, Jackson, a few minutes ago, the question about the leadership. If we can accept somebody to still be our leader, even if he doesn't pursue the interests of our community. This is a controversial issue. We always have to trust a leader so long as this leader is imbued with principles of morality, of principles of virtue. That's why Mill states that individuals can react even in this situation, first by obtaining some sort of political liberties or rights. They have to obtain this sort of immunities. And secondly, by establishing some system of constitutional checks and balances, that they could always address issues of, let's say, improper management on behalf of the rulers. They can do this. But what Mill is afraid of the most is the tyranny of the majority. When people themselves start giving their own guidelines to his fellow men to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, there's an issue with misinformation circulating among the ordinary people, the masses, and you can have a kind of mob rule.
Yeah.
Where you have a mob forming that is unmoored to any kind of, people will, we know psychologically that people in a group feel less sense of obligation than when they're alone. So you feel like you have the protection of the group, so you can do something that you would never do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be very dangerous, but I want to go back to Aisha's point earlier, mentioning education.
Yes.
So
that's it.
Education is education equal education, accessible education, particularly with the humanities, particularly with philosophy. We need to build in virtue in the people, not just technical skills, not just techne. The Greek word techne. We need Sophia. We need wisdom too. And so there's I think a major issue here would be the sort of lack of respect for the humanities. And I'm curious, this is a problem we have in the United States, where it seems like there's little attention and there's more and more cuts to humanities programs. I'm curious if this is happening in Greece or India, where I think this conversation is kind of, we've led to the point where we kind of have a need for the humanities, developing virtue and ideals in citizens, not just technical skills. They can do math, they can do experiments in a lab, but they have no moral or spiritual background. So I'd like to put that and kind of follow up on Aisha's point about education having a very important role here.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Hello.
Yes,
I'm
Aisha.
good.
Yes,
I would
Aisha.
like to follow up.
Jump in. Yes, please jump
yeah.
in. Yeah.
So, as Professor Daniel was saying, that education plays a vital role in a democracy. I agree with that. And I think the problem more these days is not just lack of education, but also misinformation and disinformation, which was also mentioned in this, discussion. And the thing is, that the main thing is that we are not being able to control this, this, what can I say, this deluge of misinformation and disinformation that is being spread on social media as well as on, national television. The thing is, the mission, all this, propaganda, I can say, propaganda is everywhere. So the thing, what I got to know is that, for example, Finland as a country is teaching its, young population to spot propaganda, to spot, misinformation. So something of that sort is also required, I think, in our country and, also in other countries. The thing is not just kids, even, adults, aged people, they can't recognize what is false news and what is real news. So another thing that was mentioned, that we get, we want our leaders to be,
if I may interrupt you, for how do you deal with this? How do people deal with misinformation in your country? Just
they don't. They don't actually. They don't. No.
They're not in position. They're helpless.
They're helpless. Yeah. Most people, they are going with propaganda. That is, because all the mainstream media is being controlled by the ruling party. So there are a few alternative news houses. From there, we can, if we choose to, if we actually choose to follow those, news platforms which are sharing alternative real news, then it's good. Otherwise, you'll be, totally flocked by all misinformation. So this is the condition here.
I think. This is go ahead.
Yeah, and another thing, as it was said, the population always gets swayed by charisma of the leaders. So I think propaganda plays a very vital role in this creation of charisma around a leader. This has happened to us here, not just now. It has happened previously. We as a country, we are swayed by charisma. We have had, celebrities who were, chief ministers in different states in India. So here, I think we focus more on hero worship. This exists in India. I don't know. I think, it also exists in, U.S.A, of course, Ronald Reagan and various other people who were, elected for their charisma. So I think in order to, education comes in here, where we can, stop ourselves from getting blinded by, charisma of the leaders, and, electing people for the right reasons.
Okay. Yes, please, Jackson, you can jump in here.
Yeah, absolutely. One concern that kind of pops up when we start talking about propaganda and things like that is exactly what do we mean by propaganda? Because it seems as though a lot of the times when we talk about propaganda, we're talking about something that provides a view that we don't agree with. So we're very quick to say, oh, that's propaganda. But what about something that provides a view that we do agree with? Are we going to call that propaganda? Because it very well could be as well. And especially when we talk about like news sources. So, for example, in the United States, we don't really have like a specific like state-run news, right? However, what we do have is we have news corporations. And some might say like, oh, okay, well, then the news corporations, that provides a sort of honest and unbiased view of the government. No, that's not how that works. Why? Because corporations have agendas. Corporations can put out propaganda. Corporations have a view and a perspective. Corporations have an axe to grind, just like any government would. So, ideally, it sounds like, okay, so there's state-run news and then there's alternative news agencies, listen to, the alternative, non-state-run agencies. So let me tell you, coming from a country with no state-run news, it's not any better. Like we still get the propaganda. We still get the fake news here. And so like, I'm like, again, like when we speak in these ideals, we want to avoid propaganda. We want to avoid misinformation. We want to get to the truth. Where does that come from? Because if it doesn't come from government-run news, if we don't want to trust them, fine. Do we trust private-run news? Should we trust that? How are we supposed to do this? And then this comes back to the idea of the idea of direct democracy. What type of obligation and burden are we putting on the individual to become wholly educated, like critically think on everything on their own? That is a massive intellectual burden that we're placing on people. And I'm wondering if that's a fair thing to do.
Yes, of course. And how, if this is not going to be possible, how could we counterbalance it? I mean, by what other measures could we possibly counterbalance this burden on the individual and force him to do this and that so that he can cope with massive demands of direct democratic issues? I mean, this is also a very big question to be addressed. The answers are not obvious, are not easy, but could be resolved, let's say, in the public arena. For example, if you start persuading people to participate in public debates, for example, in small places, starting from their own communities, let's say, locally, because Mill insists on the fact that he believes that the incompetence of the masses could be overcome if the people themselves were given a chance to take part in politics, especially at the local level. Yes, Daniel, jump in. Yeah.
I think what you're getting at is that the initial entry point for all of us is our family.
Yeah.
And so we have a family where we build up our character within our family, and a tyrannical government will always seek to break up the family. So so we have a problem, I think, in the United States, maybe elsewhere, where the public education, it's a government-funded education, which is accessible to all. So it has this, it seems nice, right? You have free education for all. But what it does, we have a figure, John Dewey, was a very important figure in the American public education. John Dewey was an American philosopher, and he was very influential in the public education. So it's accessible to all, free for all. And maybe this is a solution. We could get people into the schools and they could become more critical thinkers and be better citizens. And there'd be a ripple effect for all society. But the problem is that the public education becomes an extension of the government. And the kid is there longer. The kid is there longer than they're with their family. And they learn things that are contrary to the family values. So with the Dewey, it's a system of progressivism, and it's against traditional values. And so the kid is gradually being separated from their family. So there's very difficult, it's a very complex situation. But I appreciate your point about the importance of developing virtue as a kid within your family. And if you're loyal to your family first, then you're going to be more critical of government and media, and not just trust that blindly.
Yeah, exactly. Education is a key issue that could be spread among all individuals, but what kind of education? Noam Chomsky says that the education provided by institutions, let's say, is so let's say so massive that it actually makes individuals very disciplined, in the sense that it does not allow any room for personal freedom and personal improvement. We want this sort of education that could actually improve human nature, not just making a human polymath. We need this sort of education to encourage other characteristics, such as the energy of character, the autonomy, the aesthetic sensibility, the intellectual cultivation, the sense of responsibility, the self-control, the ethical issues. Actually, that these are the key points that could make an individual actually free and free an individual from his own chains.
Yeah, a liberal education. The word, the liberal liber is Latin for to free. And Aristotle had this distinction. Aristotle distinguished between the liberal education and then the one that's merely for use, the useful education, where you learn some skills so you can be a servant of the owner of the factory or a servant of the government. You just learn, we're going to train you, and it's like a factory. Like, okay, when I was in school, the bell would ring. A really loud bell every hour. Time to change classes. Beep. Still have nightmares about it.
Most educated people of world are a big problem today. They are destroying nature more than uneducated people.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important point, and Jackson and I know that the educated elite are not the answer. They're not really helping the people. So yeah, thank you for the comment, SUKHVINDER. The educated elite, in many ways they have lacked common sense. So
yeah. And according to according to Harari, a writer of Israel, in developed country, he's giving a contrast of country of Asia and country of Europe. In developed country, there are most suicide case. We are talking about developed, most democratic country. There are most case of suicide. In the country of Asia, there are less suicide case. I'm thinking the Spinoza gives a statement in his book Political Treaty. He's saying people are motivated through appetite. When people are talking about society honestly, they are pretending only. When they get chance, there are exception, rare exception who are always honest, but most of people are motivated through appetite. A lot of kind of appetite, hunger, ambition, and physical. A lot of kind physical. We see a lot of people, when they get chance, they do work only for self-interest.
Yep.
Yeah, they're motivated by appetite. Yeah.
Appetite means a lot of kind appetite of popularity, appetite of sensual pleasure, appetite
SUKHVINDER, we have to kind of wrap up our meeting. So thank you. That was a good insight. But Jackson, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, we were talking about SUKHVINDER said that education actually, ironically, the academic elites are, they're somewhat backwards. So they have the people with the highest education are not necessarily the solution to the problem.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that's evident in the United States, and in likely in a lot of other nations as well. I think one of the problems is that we think we just take education as a universal good no matter what, right? And I think that comes from, at least in the United States, I think that again comes from a philosopher you mentioned, John Dewey, who just the idea is just like educate as many people as possible. It'll always turn out better. Well, educate them in what, and exactly what is being taught here, right? And I think what it comes down to, and this kind of does play into what SUKHVINDER just said, and that is the idea that like a lot of people are driven by appetites for various types of things, and I think that was Plato's point as well. That look, people just are going to go after and chase after what it is that they want, and what it is that motivates them. And I think sorry, my daughter wants to show me her awesome ball. Yes, ball. But like so people are, a lot of people are driven by appetites, and this kind of goes to the question I asked at the end of my last statement, is that maybe one of the issues that we can consider with democracy, and why it's such a sticky problem that we have discussions like this about, is that it assumes that everyone wants and is able to participate in government and participate in rule. It takes that as an assumption. And when I talked about the burdens placed on just the average person, but just the common, person driven by appetite, let's say, the burden placed on them to become fully informed and wholly rational, I ask if that's a fair burden to just place on everyone as a universal demand. And it seems as though ideally direct democracy places that demand. And I would like to just kind of end with asking if that's a reasonable demand or a reasonable obligation to place on everyone, regardless of what it is that motivates them.
It's a huge burden. It's a huge burden. Totally. Aristocracy could be the solution, but aristocracy based on merits, on what individuals can do, on the actual abilities of the individuals. But again, there is an issue of who is going to be as an aristocratic figure.
So, concluding remark, I would like to say that I think we have come down to that thing that education is not, all it cannot alleviate all the problems of democracy, only education, because as Sukhvinder pointed out, we have appetites, and appetites without, I think, what can I say, limitation can be detrimental to the entire society. So what drives us is appetite, and I think I feel that appetite is necessary for an individual. I think it's an evolutionary trait that we have, so that we can pursue our goals. We all have our curiosities, our interests. Otherwise, I think, innovation and knowledge would come to a standstill if we don't have appetite. But the main problem is, I think, when we have when power concentrated, again, when absolute power and money is concentrated, in the hands of a particular, limited class of people. That's the problem. When appetite is without restriction, or when it comes with absolute impunity, that's the problem. And another thing, I would agree with Professor Daniel, that education is necessary. But again, as he mentioned, Aristotle's liberal education, I think we need education of that sort to, address the problems of in democracy that we are facing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much, Aisha.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for attending this online session, talking about the views of Chomsky, Rousseau, and Mill on direct democracy and democratic issues in general. Would like to personally thank the university professors, Jackson HOERTH from Temple University. Thanks for attending this session, and also Professor Daniel Del Monte from Thomas Jefferson University, both universities in Philadelphia, USA. And also would like to thank scholars and PhD candidates from India for also attending this online session with us. And we had the opportunity to exchange valuable and insightful viewpoints regarding direct democratic issues. Hope to see you again in one of our forthcoming events, talking about any other similar issues that might interest you.